from the All Indiana Podcast Network.
It's time for real conversation about the real issues that affect our communities.
Poverty, education, equality, and more.
This is Real Talk.
Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Welcome to Real Talk on the All Indiana Podcast. I'm Reverend Charles Harrison. On this episode, I will be talking about, is journalism dead in America today? And why have so many people lost trust in journalism today? Why is that such an issue? I have a special guest with me today, a friend, Greg Doyle, sports columnist for the Indianapolis Star. Stay tuned.
This season, Instacart has your back to school. As in, they've got your back to school lunch favorites, like snack packs and fresh fruit. And they've got your back to school supplies, like backpacks, binders, and pencils. And they've got your back when your kid casually tells you they have a huge school project due tomorrow. Let's face it, we were all that kid. So first call your parents to say I'm sorry, and then download the Instacart app to get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes all school year long. Get a $0 delivery fee for your first 3 orders while supplies last. Minimum $10 per order. Additional terms apply.
Are you struggling to close deals? Cold outreach is wasting the time of both the buyer and seller at every stage, especially when sellers are using shallow and outdated data. Your organization can overcome these challenges with technology that translates comprehensive, high-quality buyer data into real-time insights. These deeper insights empower sales reps and teams to adopt the habits of top performers, which leads to better outcomes, like more pipeline, higher win rates, and larger deals. We call this deep sales. And we've built the first deep sales platform with the next generation of LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Right now, you can try LinkedIn Sales Navigator and get a 60-day free trial at linkedin.com/trial. That's linkedin.com/trial for a 60-day free trial. Let LinkedIn Sales Navigator help you sell like a superstar today. Just go to linkedin.com/trial and get started.
Welcome to Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison, and thank you so much for joining me today on this podcast. And I have a very special guest with me today, Greg Doyle, sports columnist from the Indianapolis Star. He also, on occasions, when he has free time, walks with the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition in the 29th and MLK area. And today I want to talk about a subject that I've been paying attention to lately, and it really deals with the whole issue of journalism. And probably in the last 25 years, I have done a lot of interviews with the work I do with the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition, and have a lot of friends locally who are journalists. I certainly have done several national interviews too about the work that I do with the Indianapolis 10-Point Coalition. But I'm noticing a trend in journalism today, and particularly media. And I was reading an article about, the question, is journalism dead today? Are journalists more activists than journalists? So I want to talk to a journalist who's been around for a while, to talk about what is journalism, and then some of my observations that I have made, probably more so over the last 20 years concerning journalism in America. So welcome, Greg.
Welcome to me. Thank you, Reverend Harrison. I'm going to have a lot to say.
Okay, well,
and I'm going to ask people to open their minds. I mean, I'm not going to disagree with a lot of things you're going to say.
Okay.
I don't know what you're going to say.
Right,
but I'm not going to disagree with a lot.
Right.
But I've got a lot of pushback in some areas. And the problem with this, with so many things, is people listening, they already know what they know.
Right.
And I can't tell them anything.
Right.
And I'm about to tell some people some things that they should know, and they're going to hear it and go, nah, okay. Try to listen. You're on here for a reason, right? Listen up. Try to learn something.
So
not you. I mean them.
Well, no, because I hope to be educated. So when we think in terms of a journalist, what is a journalist, and what were you trained to do as a journalist, going through school, or however you became a journalist?
Well, it's a rather simple mission, and mine is slightly different because I've become this opinion writer. So what I do is a little bit different. But bottom line is we're just told to report the facts. Okay. That the mission is report the facts. But we're going to venture into some areas where you're talking about some folks, not all folks, but some folks who's kind of like mine. My job is more analysis of the facts. And that's where journalism has actually shifted. It's shifted really from reporting the facts, which still happens, to more analysis of the facts. And that's because we now know and believe and know that most people already kind of know a lot of the facts themselves. They saw it on TV, they saw it on Twitter, they saw it on social media. People know the facts. We're not telling them that much they don't know. So we feel like our job, I think, in a lot of shoes, is to analyze those facts.
So why and when did that shift happen?
The internet. The internet. Because, listen, and there's such a newspaper component to this, because before the internet, the newspaper was the show in town. TV too, yes, of course. Right. But back in the day, and it wasn't that long ago, 20 years maybe, everybody got the newspaper. Right. Whether you agreed with it, didn't agree with it, whatever, you subscribed. And you subscribed not because you necessarily loved the Indianapolis Star or the Leesburg Daily Commercial in Florida or whatever newspapers in your town. You subscribed because you wanted to know what was going on. Right. And yes, the TV news had it, but the newspaper you could carry around with you and learn. Now people already know what's going on. They're not subscribing much anymore. Right. So it's our position in the community, specifically newspapers, but everybody's, we're all fighting for the scraps of attention. And to earn that attention, we need to bring something with authority. Okay. And so we've transitioned from here's the facts, knowing full well that most people know the facts, to now we're trying to deliver some authority on what those facts mean. I'm very active on X, used to be Twitter, very active on social media. You're not going to hear me call it X, by the way. Okay. Elon can try to rename something after a letter. Okay. There's only 26 of them, Elon, and you don't get one. It's Twitter to me.
It's Twitter. Okay, Twitter. we use Twitter. But there are a lot of... I find it helpful because it allows me to hear different perspectives on Twitter.
Are you looking for different?
I am.
Because most people are not. And I find it unhelpful because most people don't really care about different. They want to find out, here's what I think. Right. I'm going to find people that say what I think, and it's going to reinforce what I think. And they're convinced they're right up to the point that we're storming the Capitol on January 6th because we think that's what we should be doing. Right. Sorry, backing away from that now.
Well, no, because I think part of the problem is that I don't want to become so narrow in my thinking because I come in with a biased perspective on things.
We all do.
Yeah, we all. So then, if half the country believes this and the other half of the country believes that, why do they see the world differently than me?
Because you're looking at both.
Yes.
That's why. And you are so rare. That's why when you started to say you find Twitter helpful, and before you could say, because you look at both sides, in my head, I'm thinking it's not helpful at all, because all it does is reinforce what we already think. People, and woe is me for a minute, but people don't want to read what they don't already want to know. Okay. So, for example, the Colts last night, and I wrote last night that Anthony Richardson looked great playing against a bunch of future Uber drivers. Okay. Because he was playing the Bengals' second, third, fourth team. Right. People are mad at me for that.
They are.
I'm sorry. Is that not true?
Right.
I mean, that's what he was doing. How dare you tell me that Richardson was playing against inferior? They don't want to be, in other words, they don't want to be told what they don't want to be told. Right. So you're asking, why does the country see things differently than you? That's because half of us believe this over here, and we go and look for people that will write or say or speak this over here, and it drives the point home. Boy, this over here is correct. Look at all these folks saying it. But then on the other side of the aisle, they've had their own people, their own mouthpieces, and they think that everything that they want to hear is true because everyone that they hear is saying it. They don't realize half the world is saying the exact opposite. They're not listening to that half of the world.
So is that the reason we see this shift in? For instance, give an example. If I'm watching TV, if I want to get the Democratic perspective or a more liberal perspective on things, I'm going to turn to MSNBC or CNN. I have that already bias in me that is going to be slanted. Mm-hmm. If I want to hear a more conservative Republican viewpoint of things, I will then turn to Fox News because my assumption is their perspective is going to reflect that in the news. So I go into that already with the notion that Fox is biased, CNN and MSNBC is biased. So if I want to know what's going on, and from both perspectives, I'm going to listen to a little of both sides to get a perspective on their viewpoints, and that's how I go into it. So maybe I'm going into it the wrong way, but my assumption is that one station, they may be reporting the news, but it's from a slanted perspective, as I see it. Fox, more conservative, more Republican. CNN, MSNBC, more slanted toward Democrat liberal perspective. And that's how I see it. And I also see newspapers and others in the same way.
Well, there's no question about it. What happens is we're all human.
Okay.
Whether it's me writing sports or MSNBC anchors, The Morning Joe,
right.
Tucker,
right.
That horrible human being, Carlson. Sorry.
Right.
So you know where my bias is. But
I hear him.
Yeah, but we're all biased. And so, but the thing is, we all, and I would like to say we all think we're right. And
right.
I'm not even going to give Tucker that much credit. How many times have we heard behind the scenes, like that whole Dominion voting thing, where he came out like in depositions and whatnot was saying, I didn't believe these things, but I said them anyway because my audience wanted to hear them. One side of the aisle, one side of the media aisle gets caught admitting behind closed doors that they actually say things they know isn't true, but they know their people want to hear it. That's why folks like me, and there's a lot of folks like me, just can't take one side seriously, because you never hear people on the left being accused of, they don't even mean that. They've said behind closed doors, they didn't mean that. No, we actually believe what we say.
Okay.
We believe everything we say, whereas the other side, and it's all, and I'm sorry, I'm going way too far with this, but
no, go ahead. Yes, because I think this is an important conversation.
Well, okay, because I want to be fair. I try to be fair, but being fair doesn't mean both sides are absolutely correct. Like, you could say, who's the greatest basketball player of all time? Is it LeBron James or is it Danny Ainge? You could have that argument, but it's pretty clear that one of them doesn't belong. Right. So you can have the argument that, well, both sides are full of crap. Okay, but one side is more full of crap than the other. One side has a guy that ran for president that has been quoted as saying years before he ran, I probably would run. I'm a Democrat, but I probably would run as a Republican because those folks will vote for me. I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and still get elected.
Right.
When the Republican. That was Donald Trump.
Right.
He is. And people don't care that, like, that's who he is. That's what he said, that he could go either way, but he'll pick the side that'll vote for him, knowing full well, in his words, he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and still get voted in by that side. So it's hard to take that side seriously when their own leaders, Tucker Carlson, Donald, don't necessarily believe what they say. If what I just said, and I don't expect you to, but anybody listening, if what I just said is not factually true, then tell me that. But it is factually true, so I get worked up about this. And I told you I was praying in the car on the way over here. Lord, give me the wisdom to not say what I just said. And I'm so sorry. I really am sorry.
But how do you as a columnist, and you do more sports, then speak to the people who have a different perspective and believe that. For instance, my car broke down. It had to be about 35 years ago. I was in seminary, and one morning I was going back to, maybe been 40 years ago. It's been so long ago. Going back to seminary. I was just north of Cincinnati, about 25 or 30 miles, 2 o'clock in the morning. Cold that day. And I waited for probably an hour before an Ohio State trooper came by, called a tow truck. Tow truck came, and the gentleman towed my car back to his shop. And I don't know how we got on this conversation about politics, but Jesse Jackson was running for president then. So you know how long ago that was.
Yeah. And I know how this country wasn't ready for that, but keep going.
But the comment was from this white male was that he really didn't like black people. I'm in the tow truck with him, and I don't know where I am. Before we had the cell phones. So I'm not trying to say anything that is going to upset him. Yeah. I just want to get to where he's going to take me. But the confession or the statement that he made, he said, well, in some ways, in Jesse Jackson, you have someone speaking in your behalf that as a white male, we don't have. Because during that time, you started to have the factories that started to leave many of these rural communities, and their middle class, lifestyle was beginning to leave. I pastored a church in Newcastle, Indiana, where Chrysler was the big employer. Where Chrysler left, Alleghany's left, and it had a devastating impact on those communities. And I remember hearing people say, no one was advocating for them, and now you have someone who comes along who, you just think, you don't think much of him, but they see him as advocating for them when no one else would. And I remember that years ago, that conversation I had with that gentleman, early in the morning time, he felt like no one was their voice for them, and they were hurting too.
I hear that. I do hear that, but nothing happens in a vacuum, including this country's history, and it's really hard. And I'm a white male. Look at me. I'm 54, but it's hard for me to, knowing what I know, hard for me to take seriously folks that feel like the poor white man just doesn't have enough wind in the sails.
Right.
This country has been blowing a hurricane in the white man's back for hundreds of years. It's just, it was, clearly segregation, slavery. We know these facts.
Right.
And yes, things have shifted. And if at times it shifts a little bit too far, in some people's opinions, like, well, now now white folks need an advocate. I understand that, I get that, but again, the deck is stacked. I'll give you one quick small example. Okay. So I had a pretty good friend of mine. We had a falling out actually over the 2016 election, but pretty good friend of mine. He was in his 90s. And he grew up poor, really, really poor, just like my dad did, really poor. And he used to live like in a place with no heater and all that. And he would say, and he became a doctor, and did just fine. And he said, I grew up having to use an outhouse. And he would say this, thinking he was winning an argument, that was my white privilege, that he had to use an outhouse. And I told him, your white privilege wasn't that you were poor and had to use an outhouse. Your privilege is that in the 1950s, you were that poor, you were able to climb out of there without anybody telling you can't do it. Nobody was saying you can't work here because you're black. Nobody was saying you can't get into this school because you're black. Nobody was saying you can't drink from this water fountain because you're black. Your white privilege allowed you with your own hard work. White privilege didn't make you a doctor. You made it, but you had no wind in your sails. My dad's the same way. He grew up dirt poor. I will put my dad's poverty against anybody's, and that's a big statement, but I've written about it. Google it.
Okay.
Against anybody's. He spent one Christmas living in a chicken coop. Put it that way. Being his white privilege wasn't that he grew up poor. His white privilege was that he had people fighting for him to get into college, people fighting for him to get into law school, people advocating on his behalf every step of the way until he became a retired judge. Okay. So that's where I struggle to I feel bad for anybody saying we need someone like Trump advocating on our behalf, especially the way he does it. How you compete matters. And we all grew up differently, and I want to monologue here, and I'm sorry, but we all grew up differently. But my dad taught me you don't boo the other team. Like we went to Ole Miss basketball games and Kentucky's in town. Everybody hates Kentucky.
Right.
You don't boo Kentucky.
Like a Louisville fan.
Well, you just don't boo. And I'm different. People are not like I am, and I understand that. But you don't boo the other team. There's a way to win and lose correctly. But in the same token, like when my school, most colleges, most fans I see don't really care if their school cheats or if there's whispers of cheating. They just want to win. Right. And I grew up being told that if you win with cheating, then you might as well lose. And so I don't advocate for that. And bottom line is, I'm not saying Trump's cheating. My bottom line is there's a proper way to win. And if you can't win the proper way, I'd damn near rather lose. And the way that the side you're talking about advocates, he advocates with cruelty. He makes fun of people with disabilities. He advocates with racist terminology, with sexist terminology. He advocates in a way that has gotten him felonies, that has gotten him accused of sexual assault. He advocates in a way that actually triggered January 6th. That's not a side I want to see win.
Yeah, but how as a journalist do you
I'm a human being right now.
Yeah.
That's the thing, and I can't take my human card out and put it aside and say I'm going to be. I can't pretend to be. Yeah. There's a great line in the movie The Contender with Gary Oldman is playing a senator, and there's a presidential transfer of power, and there's a vice president coming in, and it's an old 1990s movie. I'm a very big 1990s pop culture guy. Maybe it's The Candidate, The Contender. It's about a vice president has to replace another vice president,
right.
And some very naive and not ambitious, but just very idealistic senator says to Gary Oldman's character, "You're here for your objectivity." And Gary Oldman says, "Go to the dictionary, find the word objectivity, and scratch it out. You're not here for objectivity. You're here because of what you know and what you believe and what you can bring to your party." And that's kind of I struggle with that because I'm very objective, and so I can't just. But I can't forget things I know.
Okay. The question, if every side reinforces what people continue to believe, then how do we bring civility and unity to the country?
It's over. It's gone.
It's gone.
Oh, it's gone.
So we.
No, really, we don't. We don't. I mean, listen, I would love to sit here and tell you. I'd love to think that really smart people could sit down and figure out how to do this. But you've got a division. You've got people on the left going farther left, which I don't like.
Okay.
Listen, bring back Mitch Daniels. Bring back Governor Holcomb can be my governor for life.
Right.
Find me somebody, and Holcomb's not. I don't agree with everything he does at all. But find me somebody remotely in the middle, willing to listen to the other side. And I'm on board, but those people are few and far between.
Yeah, they can't get elected anymore.
Yeah,
I'm a Bill Clinton Democrat. I'm a moderate, Democrat.
I'm a Mitch Daniels Republican.
Okay, you're a Mitch Daniels Republican. But I can't find, some of the arguments I can make about the left side and the Democratic Party, because I feel like as a black man, I'm used by my race. Quit using the word racist all the time to get me to vote for you. And I feel like, I walk the streets of Indianapolis. I've been doing 10 Point for 25 years. I may be doing it for another 25 years if God allows me to live long enough. Nothing is changing out there. Nothing has changed from the 1970s to here we are, 2024. Nothing is changing out there. We keep voting for mayors, for governors, for senators, for president. Greg, nothing changes.
You're right. But I don't know if picking a side that kind of has history of not really being very friendly to a certain cause is going to work better than the side that's tried to help a cause. But I hear what you're saying. I've heard that the Democrats have taken the black vote for granted.
Yes.
And I'm not arguing with that.
Yes.
Because the assumption is, well, why wouldn't we being Democrats shouldn't have to try very hard to pursue that demographic, because that demographic ought to vote for us automatically. And that's I can see that being very hurtful to be taken for granted. Like each one of all of us, we have a brain. We're all allowed to think for ourselves as opposed to think in a voting block. But politicians see us all as voting blocks. They don't see us as human beings, and that can be hurtful.
I would want someone at least to, when I say journalism, at least to speak to that reality. If you're a Republican, the way I win is I find some way to accuse you of being racist. Because what that will do is will cause Rev Harrison get up on Sunday morning at his church and tell all of my members that Greg Doyle is a racist.
But what if it was true? I love Trump has said, we're going back left and right, and I've got things to say, and not kind things about journalism. I promise I do.
Right.
But Trump has said it's a witch hunt, and I saw this great political cartoon. There was, obviously in a liberal newspaper, the Washington Post, New York Times, wherever it was, and it was quoting Donald Trump as saying, "This is nothing but a witch hunt," but it had Donald Trump dressed up as a witch. Because sometimes the witch hunt, there's actually a witch, right? Like to me, that's an empty. It's just a witch hunt. That's true, but sir, you're a witch.
I think Black America has had 400 years with white folk that we know when a white person is a racist. And we don't need people to tell us that.
You know what? I hear that and I go, you know what? I drop the mic.
Yeah.
You just dropped a mic on me because what am I going to say to that?
Yeah.
Other than okay, you sir are correct.
But talk about your perspective on that, because I'm interested in where do you think you're getting it right as journalists, and maybe where you're not.
I think we're only truly getting it because right and wrong can only be defined really by facts.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm aware that I come across very strong and I say things very hard and I say them like they're facts. In my quieter moments, I'm aware that these are opinions.
Okay.
And in my louder moments, I like to think, yeah, but these opinions are facts. Well, kind of like my whole LeBron versus Danny Ainge thing. Like that's an opinion, but that's a fact.
That's facts.
I realize these are opinions. So where we get it right is when we cover something and here's what happened and the 5 W's, who, what, where, when, why, and how, and that's all we do. The problem, not the problem, but the reality of the situation is that all of us, just like you, just like me, we all bring our life experience to whatever we're doing, including our jobs. And if you look at it, it's not a coincidence that journalists tend to go left.
Okay.
Because the kind of person that's brought to this kind of line of work, at least back in the day, now with everything shifting and it becoming a more personality-driven enterprise, and you kind of have to get attention whether you want it or not. It's attracting a different kind of person. But back in the day, it attracted kind of do-gooders.
Okay.
People that just want to do good. I want to report on what's going on, and I want to expose injustice. That's what it brought out. It brought people that I want to expose injustice. And by nature, if you want to expose injustice, you're kind of a do-gooder.
Right.
And maybe you do want to hug trees, or maybe you do want to save the whales because you want to help the world along. But that's a certain kind of person that will tend to lean liberal.
Okay.
And so what you have is obviously, I mean, listen, everybody knows newspapers for 100 years have, whatever they started out in the 20s and 30s and 40s, have gradually gotten farther and farther left. It's like I read Ron Luciano, an umpire, talking about calling balls and strikes for somebody like, maybe it wasn't Luciano, but calling balls and strikes for Greg Maddux, the great pitcher for the Braves.
Right.
His control was so good that he would throw a fastball over the black of the plate, the 18-inch, the black strip of the plate. If the umpire called that a strike, he'd throw it 1 inch outside the black, which is now a ball.
I remember when he was with the Cubs.
But he could do it.
Yeah, he could.
And the umpire would say, well, that's close. That's a strike.
Right.
Now Maddux is going 2 inches outside. That's a strike. Pretty soon Greg Maddux is throwing the ball 1.5 feet outside, and they're still calling it a strike because he's been gradually creeping that way.
Wow.
That's kind of been newspapers. We've been creeping left, and so now we're so far left that we have to actually go out and find. And the Star's we try so hard because we also know that we're trying to be fair, we're trying to be neutral, trying to be or at least objective or both sides, whatever.
Right.
But we also know that we're in Indiana's a red state.
Right.
Now Indianapolis is a blue city.
It's a blue city.
Indiana's a red state.
Right.
We try to find and look for actively conservative voices, because we know that what we have isn't necessarily conservative. I would say James Briggs is as moderate a Democrat as he's our Metro columnist, James Briggs. He is so moderate, so in the middle, but he's rare. And I'm sure people on the right are saying, no, he's not. Yeah, he is. If you don't think James Briggs is moderate, then whoever you are listening, then you're part of the problem. Because if you can't, like I can recognize Mitch Daniels as being what he is, which is great. If I can't recognize Mitch Daniels and Holcomb as being helpful Republicans, then I'm part of the problem. Because you've got it. When there's finally someone here to help you, recognize it. So anyway, point is, we are so far left in historically the media, we have to go out and find conservative voices to write for us because they don't just come through the pipeline.
Wow.
They just don't.
I could tell. So as they're coming in younger and younger, are they, because the question I want to ask you, are they more activists than reporters?
Now, listen, I mean, it can look that way. I don't speak on this with authority. I really don't. I realize, but you're right from the start. I do. I realize that. But I cover sports and I dabble in other things. I have a dog. I've got things. I've got interests. So I don't know our young reporters. I don't know their backgrounds, but I do know that.
What what you see nationally?
Nationally, in general, so Twitter is a window into the soul, and our soul is kind of ugly. And by our, I mean the world. Right. But you can clearly tell that the voices on Twitter that are the loudest, that are the young journalist voices, are activists. They are, or they'd like to be, or they're trying to not hide that, but they're trying to suppress that as they do their job. Of course, as I say, this line of work attracts a certain kind of person, and that kind of person wants to change the world.
Okay.
And that kind of means activism. It just does. And so it's like your better angels. You try to keep your better angels down and do your job as fairly as you can. But the kind of person that brought you into that chair in the first place was someone who would lean towards activism if they had a different job.
How does newsrooms deal with that?
Oh, well, we're always training, talking about staying neutral, staying fair, and having editors that read it and watch it and notice. And we do. I would tell you that, like in my newsroom specifically, our folks we don't write slanted. Because to be slanted means to ignore facts on the other side, or to only play up the facts on your side that are good. And that's slanting. Slanting is actually to know you're writing something that's not quite 100% accurate, but you write it anyway. We don't do that.
Okay.
It is not our fault. It is not our fault that some of the leaders in this state, Todd Rokita, Mike Braun, James Banks, have no moral code at all. Okay. That's not our fault that they have behaved that way. Their voting record, the things they've said, the things they choose to share on Twitter as if this is a good thing to share these things. It's not our fault that we actually notice that, and it's hard to take them seriously as political, quote, leaders when all they're trying to do is get elected. Okay. That's all they're trying to do. And in this state, it works. But don't get mad at us for noticing that's all they're trying to do, because it's very painful. It's very painful.
So in those cases, you see the job as a journalist is to report that.
Report it.
Okay.
But we see what they do, and it's kind of hard to not kind of. Now I'm talking about me.
Okay.
I see what these folks do and how they behave and act, and it's hard for me to not include a snide little comment. I know that our political coverage. We do the Joe Friday, just the facts, ma'am. Here's what he said. Here's what he did. Here's what she said. Here's what she did. And sometimes the facts look like they look, Okay. And here's what Braun has said for 10 years, and here's what he's done for 10 years. And people say, "How dare you be mean to Braun?" Well, we're not being mean to Braun. We're reporting actually what he said and done. If you think that makes him look bad, then maybe you ought to rethink who you like.
As a columnist, as you write about sports, whether it's the Pacers, the Colts, or other teams, how do you write the story and sometimes not give your personal bias in writing the story?
You're asking me as a columnist?
Yes.
Oh no, it's in there. But the way I do it is I make it very clear.
You make it very clear?
I make it very clear. Like,
okay.
I'm writing, and I use the first person pronoun a lot, I, and you're not supposed to. We get trained not to. Okay. But as this business changes, right, and it becomes somewhat personality driven, somewhat just like people don't see us anymore as just a name. They see you as a person. They want to know, well, why are you writing that? Okay. I try and tell them exactly why I'm writing that. And so if you like, I'm not doing it here. I don't hide who I am anywhere. Right. So if you don't like what you're reading and you think, oh, well, you must hate this guy, I'll write, well, maybe I do hate that guy, but here's why I hate that guy. And here's where I come from that taught me that what that guy, and we could be talking about sports right now. We could be talking about cheating, whatever. My code is that this guy or this woman, that's wrong. Okay. And so I'm writing it, but here's why I think it's wrong. So but I've gotten the luxury of being transparent like that. Our reporters don't have that luxury, and therefore they don't drop in, if they don't happen to like whoever they don't happen to like. You're not going to know that. You might think it. How, they keep writing negative. Well, maybe the stuff that's happening on that side of the aisle is negative. But we just write those folks write the facts, and readers decide. And here's the thing. Readers decide to get back to why do people distrust the media. What we're talking about is a big part of it. Everybody has their own opinion, their own slant. And even if they try and hide it, you can't hide all of it. You just can't do it. But we elected in 2016 the most powerful person on the free earth, who called us fake news. That's what he called us. Right. Called us fake news. And I mean, the guy just throws a tantrum for 4 years. Right. And people that voted for him, you're not going to vote for someone and decide he's full of garbage. So if you voted for that guy and he's telling you that everybody in the media is fake news, almost by definition, to support your own integrity, you have to believe what he says. Right. You better, because why'd you vote for him if you don't believe what he says? Right. So now that's 50 million people have been told by their leader that we're fake news. And of course, their leader is biased against us because we're the ones that keep finding out all of his bankruptcies and all the lawsuits against him and all the times he's been accused of sexual assault and all, and of course he doesn't like us. Well, I'm sorry, then stop doing what you've been doing. There's a local radio guy here who's off the air now because he was terrible, that all he used to complain about, his name's Dan Dockich, all he used to complain about, the Indy Star keeps writing about me. Well, yeah, Dan, because you keep putting your foot in your mouth and you call people in Scottsburg meth heads and you keep accusing people of being this and that and the other thing. And so when you do that, it gets a lot of attention and we write about it. So if you're mad at your public about your public persona, don't get mad at the messenger who reported on your public persona. Change who you are as a human being. Mm-hmm. And he couldn't do it and lost his job. The guy in 16 couldn't do it and lost his job in 20. We'll see if he gets it back in 24. But sometimes the messenger is just the messenger. And I think bottom line, that's one of the biggest takeaways I would have from what I've said, is that the messenger oftentimes is just the messenger, but we get blamed for more than that because the messenger has to deliver a message people don't want to read. And you don't want to read it because Tucker Carlson says it's not true. Even Tucker Carlson himself has said in depositions that I don't even believe what I say sometimes, but I say it because my listeners want to hear it.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison,
yes,
and my special guest is Greg Doyle.
Sorry.
On the other side, though, here's the pushback that you hear on the other side is that that's fair to probe into, someone who's not living up to what they profess. But in the 2020 election, the criticism was that there was a real story out there that never got reported on about the laptop of the current president's son. That turned out to be true, but at the time it was reported as disinformation. If the purpose is to bring the truth out, should it not apply on each side?
Now, I'm not yet. It should. It absolutely should. I say that in a vacuum because I'm not hiding behind something like if I don't know enough about that one, and maybe I should. Maybe what you're saying is I should. But from what I understand of that situation, is it's apples and oranges compared to some other stuff, and so apples and oranges. And I'm not. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know what has come of that, but I will tell you that when I hear things like that, when I think about what is happening everywhere, I think of the parable of the plank in the eye and the speck in the eye. If that's a speck in one side's eye, then that's a speck in the eye. But that doesn't make up for the plank in the other eye. And I feel like sometimes there are people with planks in their eye that look for specks. Like, yeah, but what about, it's called, but whataboutism. But what about over there? Well, let's worry about what's over there. But how about we first take this gigantic plank out of our eye over here? So I'm stammering only because I wish I was an expert on the Hunter Biden laptop. I'm not, but I don't think, from what I understand, it's not nearly as ugly as I think what you think it is. But I admit to not being an expert.
No. I do think it's relevant. I think all of that is relevant. I think when it comes to getting to I think it's like in my job as a pastor. When I talk about particular things in the pulpit on Sunday morning, I try not to elevate one sin above all the other sins, and people tend to do that. In my profession, people tend, if you are, sexual sins tend to be elevated as the big sins, where if you're lying, you're cheating, you're stealing, those things are the little sin, or if you're gossiping, those things tend to be little sins, when actually that's not really what the Bible teaches, is that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, that sin is sin. So I'm trying to improve on whatever my sin is to live to be a better person. I'm trying to be a better person. That's what so as I preach and teach as a pastor, I try to focus on how do I become a better person. And I don't try to uplift one, and I think gets it in, particularly the church, in trouble when it comes to the whole LGBTQ thing, because that sin has been elevated above all other sins, if this is the greatest sin. And I think that's the great problem in the church today, is that we misrepresent the gospel. So that's the only reason I brought that up, is that when people say, because I hear this, well, this side focuses on this person's problem, but they never look at the issues on the side that they may be supporting?
Well, two things. One is, and I know we're going to disagree on this, and that's just how it goes, but I don't associate the letters LGBTQ and the word sin. I don't. To me, those are mutually exclusive. I mean, obviously, anybody is capable of sinning. A hetero, I'm capable of sinning, but by definition, LGBTQ to me is not a sin. But the other thing is, I hear what you're saying about elevating one sin bigger than the other. But my deal is, and I think journalism's deal is, you look at the country as a place to be tended to. So on the one hand, you've got a group of people that have an oil spill. On the other hand, you got a group of people that need to sweep their floor. I don't think we should spend equal time sweeping a floor over here when there's an oil spill over there. People say, well, how come you're not right about that we got to sweep the floor? How about we sweep the floor after we get rid of the oil spill? Because the oil spill is going to bring down everybody. Sweeping the floor, that's a detail. The oil spill is a catastrophe. How about we deal with the catastrophe first?
But that's what we hear in the black community, where our issues are not as important as white folk issues.
Because we don't know them. We don't.
That's what I'm saying. Right. It's a different perspective on this, and probably the argument is being made when we say certain things are important in our community because it impacts the quality of life. For some people, they may not feel like that is important, but for us, it is important. When we say X, Y, and Z is the reason why this is happening, we're speaking from our perspective, and that is an important issue, in our community that we feel like, really needs to be addressed, because from our worldview, based on our experience, this is the reason why it's happening.
Well, and you guys, your community is right.
Right.
And I say your community, my community, because you're a black man, I'm a white man.
Right.
So that's why newspapers try so hard, and we try so hard to be as diverse as we can. We want to reflect. It's not just about having numbers like, we should have X number of whites, X number of black folks. It's more about reflecting your community percentage wise. If Indianapolis is, just to use a number, 30% black, I have no idea, but if it is, our newsroom should try to be 30% black.
It's about that.
At a minimum.
Right.
So we can have enough people. But we fall short, and most do, because, and I don't know why this is, but there aren't as many candidates. There aren't. I don't think, anyway. I'm not an expert on journalism schools, but I feel like journalism schools don't reflect the diversity of our country. And so the pool of candidates don't reflect the diversity of the country. And so it's hard to be as diverse as you want to be. I know we try so hard. We talk about it all the time. We try so hard. You mentioned the community and the issues that are important to your community. And it reminds me of the last time I was walking near MLK and 29th. I was talking to a woman who said, a resident there, who says that the street lights are knocked out in too many places. The alleys between the roads are all potholes, and there's garbage here and there's garbage there, and it's not safe. But there aren't, like, IMPD has cameras all over downtown, and probably in the areas where the loss of property would be significant. IMPD doesn't have cameras on 29th and Udell. Udell. It doesn't. And because whatever gets lost there won't be, quote, as valuable as maybe a computer store downtown. And so folks in that neighborhood are, they tell me they're frustrated because they can tell that because they're not seen as being as valuable monetarily, they don't get the same attention as other areas. And so their quality of life is not getting improved. Life is all about momentum. And if things are going well, it's easy to keep going well, and pretty soon caramel. And if things are going bad, it's easy for them to keep getting worse and worse. And all of a sudden, that area at 29th and MLK has 10-point marching around there because it's a dangerous spot to be. So it's diversity is huge, that we could know about these stories. Never mind just writing them accurately, but even hearing about them. But it's just in my line of work, the pool of candidates is not nearly as diverse as the country is, and that's a very real thing we're trying to overcome. I used to have the conversations with Eunice Trotter. You remember? I don't know if you knew her when she was there. Love Eunice Trotter. Eunice. Me and Eunice would have those conversations, and about some of the stories, in the Star when she was the editor. And I said, Eunice, it is not the perspective of the black community, and how the story was written. Because it was written by a white person.
Yes,
right?
it was written by a white person.
Who I'm sure meant their best.
I'm
sure meant their best.
Right.
But you don't know what you don't know.
Right. That's true.
I'm sorry I interrupted you. What were we going to say about
No. But it was my I was just trying to say, and because even in the black community and the conversations I would have with Eunice, is that we're not a monolithic community. So even within Black America, we don't agree on all issues, and some of it is generational. It really is. Those of us who are 55 years and older probably see the world a whole lot differently than our children do. Because I was born in 1960 during segregation. So my kids don't know nothing about, when we went down to Mississippi, that I couldn't drink out of the same water fountain as white people.
Those are scenes from movies. That's not real.
Yes, and that's real. Or you couldn't try on shoes in a store. You had to just buy them. And a dress. You had to buy them or pants because black people couldn't try on stuff that if we tried them on, that white folk would try on. I mean, that's the reality. So when younger black people talk about how tough it is, it's not as tough for you as it was for us and for my parents and for my grandparents, because the world we lived in was much differently than the world you live in today when they talk about race.
No, I mean, that is undeniably true. But what I would say to that is that we are all products of what we see and live and perceive. And so people that any of us could not go back to the 1920s and have to walk to school literally and then go work after school and just whatever hardships they had with no electricity and covering up with blankets. Right. Every last one of us would freeze to death. Right. But to them in the 20s, it was normal. And so to you in the 60s, and I hate that was normal. I mean, I can't even believe that was normal, but that was normal. Yeah. So for you, that was your normal every day. I'm going to overcome this today. But today's youth, to them, what's normal is what is so much softer. Yes. Than what was normal to you. Yes. But they don't know it's soft.
I know they don't.
So they don't know.
I know my kids don't.
Well, I mean, it's almost listening. Yeah. Like I've got a dog who's you grow a certain hair coat based on your temperature. And if you're able to grow a coat of hair as a dog that can handle Alaskan winters, you can survive outside. Right. But if you're used to Indiana and you're able to grow a coat of hair that's only used to this, to you can die of exposure in Indiana. Right. Because you're not born with enough. I'm talking about dog hair. Right. So that's kind of how people are. We are born into the world we're born in, and we think it's hard, and you can't tell us differently. I know it. You just can't.
I know it. Even some of the conversations we're in on this note, when y'all debate about who's the greatest basketball players, I said people.
That's where I was going to go next. Keep going.
But because people are basing it on what they see today.
Yes.
In the 1970s, Dr. J and Moses Malone, they would fill arenas. Right. And back in George McGinnis, when he would come to town, I'm from the Jeffersonville, Louisville area. So when Indiana Pacers would come to town, we was coming to see George McGinnis. When Julius Erving would come to town, Dr. J from the Nets, I think before there was a Jordan, there was Dr. J.
And before that, there was an Oscar.
And there's Oscar, yes,
people have no idea who good Oscar was.
That's
and they say, well, Oscar couldn't do what LeBron does.
Right.
Maybe not the Oscar you've seen on TV and highlights in the 60s, but if Oscar Robertson grew up in this day, he would be LeBron.
That's right. He sure would.
But similarly, if today's youth, the toughest of today's youth, who all they have to get through is whatever they have to get through, if those folks were born 50 years ago, they would have gotten through the 60s.
Right.
And they would have been tougher than they can ever imagine because they would have had to.
They would have had to.
We get through what we have to. So I actually have some, I don't know if sympathy is the right word, compassion, empathy for today's group that they just don't know what tough is because they don't have to know.
Right.
But if they had to know, they'd know.
Yeah.
But they don't have to, so they don't. So it's kind of hard to listen to them whine when you have no idea what tough is. At the same time, you didn't grow up in Alaska. You don't know what cold is.
Yep, that's true. Greg, thank you so much.
Are we
for
done?
This honest. We are. We're at. We did almost 50 minutes.
We did.
Yes, we did.
I guess when I'm talking, the clock's flying.
Yes, we did almost 50 minutes. But I want to continue this conversation at a later date.
Please.
I don't think we touched on everything, but I think this is an important conversation. It was helpful to me today to have this conversation with you. Thank thank you so much for joining us today on Real Talk. For those who have not subscribed to this, I ask that you subscribe to this on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Put it on your Twitter page or your Facebook page and spread the news about Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison. Thank you so much for joining us, and I pray that you have a blessed and awesome day.
This is Real Talk with Reverend Charles Harrison.
Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast.
And be sure to check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network.
Online now at allindianapodcast.com.